Hey, welcome to Module 2. This is cost classification and cost estimation. It doesn't get any better than starting a semester with these two things. Welcome to our class. I am Professor West, and this is my good friend and colleague.
Professor Valentine, how are you?
That's right. And so he's the best voice of the two of us, the grayest hair of the two of us. So you'll see us throughout the semester. And what we're trying to do for you is give you a quick overview of what this module will entail. The things we tried to drive home in here is the specific takeaways you're going to need as you go through the material and as you go down your learning path of the module. So remember in this case that this is chapter 1. This is chapter 5, but the appendix is where you're going to find this material. So don't be confused with that. They come together, but you'll have to look in two different places. Okay. The next thing is we try to give you some of this information under the modules tab where you can find the files that you're going to need. So every time you're going to have a handout that you can look at. Here's the PowerPoint slides that you've got. And then when we start working problems, you can use these as files to follow along and annotate. So we've got a kind of continuous theme that we're going with, and we'll talk you in from there. Eric, how do you think that they should use the textbook? What's the best way to use that?
I think the textbook should be, your background reading. It's challenging for students to have something for us to introduce and to explain topics at the same time. So introduce a topic to yourself. Listen to look at the videos, read the book. I think that's going to give you a lot more. It's going to be a lot more efficient for your learning process. I also believe that we're trying to be consistent in our approach with this course. So it's going to pretty much look the same way every module. I was going to say every week, but every module we're going to try to make it as consistent as possible.
Yeah, so we'll have this kind of overview. Then we'll have 2 video lectures that break up the content of the module into 2 pieces that are a little more palatable. And hopefully these things will work out as smoothly as Zoom things work out. So with that, we press on. And so one of the things you'll hear me talk about, and Eric will support me, is I always think about these things in 6 bricks. There's the ground floor. These are the things that you've got to make sure you know before you move up to the next 2 bricks. And this is ultimately the final piece that you want to take out of our this module. So out of this module, where you're headed, the conclusion is going to be making sure you can see costs in multiple views. And so, Eric, why don't you start us down here in this bottom corner with cost classifications. When you think about those, you don't have to go into all the details, but kind of give us a quick overview of those kinds of ideas.
Yeah, well, you have first thing we have is product versus period cost, and so period implies time, and product implies like a tangible product, so a tangible good. So we break those up because sometimes, as we'll see in a little bit later, sometimes you want to expense goods like exactly when they happen. Sometimes you want to hold it off in inventory for a little bit until something else happens. So that's the difference between the product and the period cost. We'll get into more detail about that shortly. Prime versus conversion costs. Those are just a combination that cost accountants use. It will seem a bit arbitrary when you first look at it, but I've actually seen this in practice. It still seems to be a bit arbitrary, but you need to know these classifications.
So these things are really cool because they're accounting speak.
Yes.
All right. Well, yes, I like accounting speak. You can impress your friends. All right. What else you got there?
Sunk versus opportunity costs. Sunk costs is cost you cannot change. It doesn't change, doesn't matter. There's nothing you can do to go back in time. If you do, let me know. I have some things I'd like to change.
That's right.
And opportunity costs. Yeah. The opportunity cost is what you're giving up to do something else. You know, life is dichotomous in that you're doing something, but you're giving up a lot of other things. So the opportunity cost is what you're giving, one of the things that you're giving up that you can quantify in order to do something else.
Okay, so they're watching this video, but they're giving up something else. Whatever
Yes.
the value of giving up something else to watch this video is their opportunity cost.
Exactly.
So stay out of the refrigerator right now. All right. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about cost behavior? You're on a roll.
Okay.
Tell us a
Cost
little bit
behavior.
about that one.
How do cost behavior, you can also say like cost movement. How do costs move relative to a different action, relative to volume, relative to sales? So how do costs move? One is variable. And so as your activity goes up or down, those costs also go up or down. You know, you work more hours, you make more money. You know,
So if you drive more miles in your car, you're going to use more gas. So,
exactly.
Okay. All right.
Exactly. And then you have fixed costs. And so fixed costs don't move relative to activity. They don't move. So, you know, you have an apartment, 2-bedroom apartment, you live by yourself, you pay $1,000 a month. You get a roommate and you pay $500 a month. But the cost of the apartment is still $1,000. So regardless of the volume, that's going to be our fixed cost behavior, our fixed cost movement. And mix is a little bit of both.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I would say like your cable bill versus pay-per-view. Yeah, you're gonna have a flat cable rate, and if you get movies on demand, each one of those is going to be variable, but your bill is just going to be one bill. You can separate out, and we will show you how to separate out the fixed versus the variable portion. But when you have an expense that has both of those mixed in together, it's a mixed cost, or combined together, it's a mixed cost.
And so then the cost behavior, what you're talking about is you're really driving this cost equation. The idea that there's a little bit fixed and a little bit variable. And so this will follow you, this will haunt you throughout the semester. The Y represents cost. The M represents the variable cost per unit. X is volume, the number of miles you've driven in your car. P represents the fixed. That's the insurance you have to pay on your car, except when you wreck it, then it will go up. But that's outside of the range of operation. We'll talk about that again. Along the lines of the cost equation, a couple of things you really need to follow are these assumptions. Okay, always remember that all of these things we'll talk about it again, but always remember that the key assumption here is that this equation is going to be linear and it's going to operate within some relevant range of activity. So if you went from having you and another person driving all the time to you had to transport 8 people, the cost that you needed to operate a 2-person vehicle going to be different than you needed to operate an 8-person vehicle. So planning for that would be a little different. And then you always have to think about the idea of relevance of the information versus the cost. You can try to gather more information all the time, but the cost of doing it and just of your time and energy and all those kinds of things may be more than the information you get out of it. So having more information may sound good, but there's always a question about whether it's valuable or not. And then Eric was talking about this idea of trying to decide if it's variable fixed, and then you've got this puzzle over whether or not it's a mixed cost. Now, if it is a mixed cost, you'd like to know, Eric, right?
Absolutely.
Which part is variable and which part is fixed?
Yep.
And so you figured out that the way to do it is through these different techniques. So what are the 3 techniques we're going to go through with them?
We have a scatter graph, which is kind of artsy. You just kind of just eyeball it to make a judgment. The high-low method. We could talk about the regression. The regression is using all the data points and with a formula formulaically just deriving that cost estimation equation. And the high-low is kind of the poor man's regression.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of,
it's the middle schooler's regression.
yeah, oh yeah, the middle school's regression, yes. So because we're using the same techniques, we're just using 2 points, 2 data points, the high and the low, instead of all the data points which you were using in a linear regression.
Okay. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, the thing that you have to recognize is that all these things give us multiple views of the costs. So you can classify them in a variety of different ways. And that's the key. So ultimately, you generally pay for a chunk of things. So if your parents ask you, how much does it cost to go to college? How much can you live on a month? And you say, $2,000 a month is good. And they say, well, how much is your rent? I don't know. How much are you? I don't know. How much are you spending on food? I don't know. They want some sub classifications. They don't just want you to tell us, here's $2,000 we give you. So
You've
it
talked to
has
my
some
son.
relevance. Yeah, I have. My kids have graduated, so it's all good. So that's what we're trying to communicate here at the start. Sorry. Eric's already talked about this, the trade-off between product cost and period, fixed cost and variable. And for me, I always think about, it's easier for me to understand definitions when I think about them as this versus that, or 2 by 2. And I got this pair of things, and they're different when I compare them to each other. Like for me, when I think about prices, I think about something that's external to my organization. So the price somebody's going to charge me for the material I use in making something, or the coffee that Starbucks buys, or the price I'm going to charge a customer. Both of those things are outside what's happening right in my cafe. Internally, though, the costs are going to be, what am I paying my barista? What am I paying the people that work there? So cost versus price, we need to be a little particular with that. Eric's already talked about product and period. That's another good comparison. Historical costs and opportunity costs. Eric kind of took us through this. He also talked about this one, but this is another one. He talked about sunk, but we didn't get a chance to talk about relevant. So what makes something relevant in terms of costs?
So it's relevant cost is a cost that is useful in a decision-making process. And again, we talked about the sunk costs, and sometimes I said that if it doesn't change, it doesn't matter. That's more important with relevant costs than it is with sunk costs. Of course, sunk costs can't change because they have already been incurred. But sometimes, if you have you have 2 alternatives that have this same recurring cost. And so if you have the same recurring costs and they're equal, then that's not relevant to your information. I mean, that's not relevant to your decision. The relevant costs are those costs that are going to change and will have an impact on your decisions to do project A versus project Z.
So if I had already purchased tickets to go to the opera, sadly I'm not an opera fan. Then I had an opportunity to buy tickets for the same night to go see Beyonce. What's the sunk cost?
The sunk cost is the tickets that you bought for the opera.
Oh, because it doesn't really matter, because
right.
it's done. I can't correct it. But if and so the relevant one though is whether I can afford Beyonce tickets.
Yes. Yes.
So
now I know what students are going to say. Well, you can always sell the opera tickets, but that's not the point. That's a different decision.
Yes.
The fact you can't get the dollar that you gave the ticket holder to purchase that opera ticket is gone. That dollar can never be respent. Now you can again, you can transfer it, you can sell it and do something else. But that's a different decision from the sunk cost of once you've already paid for this ticket.
Yeah. All right. Great. Finally, a couple of last things. You can also graph out the cost behavior. We'll obviously get into this more, but this is a graph you're going to learn to love and hate over the next several weeks. And it just shows you how the behavior works in terms of the structure. Don't forget, we've already talked about this idea of information cost and information relevance. And what do you need to actually make a decision? So that's the trade-off, just like Eric was talking about. What information do I need to make the decision at hand? And Eric talked us through this. There's a scatter graph, regression, and high-low. All of these things are going to help you split the costs into variable and fixed. So those are our pieces for today in terms of the setup for our module. And we look forward to taking you through the next pieces. And for that, I guess we're gone. Are we done, Eric?
Let me just say that you should not disdain opera. It's just classical. It's classical rap music is what it is.
Oh, well, we'll have to save the classical rap for a little bit later because I haven't practiced. All right, I'll talk to you later. All right, gang. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.